And then we get into Barnard's Loop, which goes around the Orion constellation. That's 10 degrees, so we're getting a good chunk of the sky now. And then, of course, the Milky Way last night. We could almost see the horizon. It was a great night last night. And heading towards Thomas and Davis, because of the moisture in the air, the stars close to the horizon were being overwhelmed by this sky glow and all the dampness in the air. I mentioned these already. If you've never done anything, the easiest is just taking the tripod, setting it up with a lens, and shooting at the Milky Way. That's a great way to get started. You can take individual images, or you can do a time lapse over time, and bring that into a video and create a little time lapse video. I'll give you a quick example of that. This was done on Dolly Saw's a year ago in April, so last year in April. And this was just setting up the camera with on a tripod and just taking 20-25-second exposures over about a 3-hour period. And towards the end here, you can see well, you can see the planes and stuff, of course, but occasionally you'll see this stuff that's kind of going through. It looks like almost like a greenish glow. At first I thought, that actually some aurora, and actually what it was is just oxygen, ionized oxygen in the atmosphere kind of floating through. It's hard to see on the projector. Those are fairly easy. There's free tools to create the final video. You just take images and load them into the tool and let it create the final video for us. The time lapse is pretty easy to do. That's a great way to get started. You don't have anything to track and that kind of stuff. You can also do star trails. The one image I showed of the Green Bank telescope had a little bit of star trailing to it. I have another one, several hours worth of star trails. That's another free tool that you can download. So you sit there and you're just taking like pictures of Polaris, the North Star, and do that for like 3 hours, and then you bring that into that free tool, Star Stacks, I think it's called Star Stacks, and it will create those star trails. That's a nice result as well. If you're going to do time lapse, try to get the lens as wide as possible. The wider the lens, the longer the exposure before you start seeing star trailing, because the Milky Way is moving. And so if you get something that's like this lens, we go down to like 11 millimeters. You can go full 30 seconds and just have a minimal amount of star trail. If you're using a lens like that one on that camera, which is 24, you're really limited to no more than 20 seconds because you start getting a significant amount of star trail. But if you're doing time lapse, you can still looks nice as you're stitching it together to the video. And the rule of thumb is 20 images for 1 second of video. So it takes quite the number of exposures to get something any decent length. So 10 seconds, you're talking 200 images. If you want to go 30 seconds, that's 600 images. So you just take lots and lots of images. The other thing, if you're going to be doing Milky Way, set your ISO settings up high. Since we're taking short exposures, you can kind of push the ISO, the gain on your camera. So last night on the T5i, and I haven't looked at the data yet, I was shooting at 3200 on the ISO. And for this camera, I was shooting at 2,000. This does well at 2,000. I'm very pleased with it. Some of the older cameras, if you're shooting at 3,200, they get a little bit noisy. But the newer cameras are so, the electronics and technology is so much better now. Really low noise cameras. You can really start pushing the ISO to some extent. Pretty easy. Of course, if you do anything long exposure, you need something that can track. So this mount tracks. It's got both the right ascension, all the skies, moves and height, as well as the declination for the go-to capability. And if you're not quite perfectly full aligned, you can have your auto guider adjust your declination as well. But there's, this, like I said, this is big and bulky, quite heavy. Is that the GTI?
No, that's just a story picture. Right.
Is that the two on?
Yes.
Yeah, so on this one, my son has this one right here. You can see the difference. This is easily transported. It's fairly light, sturdy, it's robust, but nowhere near as heavy as that thing. And I've taken this in my carry-on. I think Terry was mentioning yesterday, she takes her stuff on a carry-on, on an airplane. So you can travel with this type of setup where there's no way I would try to take that thing anywhere except in a car. I would not try to take any of this type of gear on a plane. I take a tripod, take a mountain head like that, Star Adventure 2i or the GTI. Those are great travel options. I actually did at one point in time make my own barn door mount. It worked okay. If you're like, I like to tinker, I like making it. So it's more of a challenge. Can I make a barn door mount? There's all kinds of plans out there to do that. But there's lots of options out there, and affordable. The Star Tracker, Star Astro Tracker, the Sky Adventure, those are affordable options now, whereas before there were no real options for that type of quality capability. I've already mentioned this, but these are my go-to lenses. I have them all up here. If anybody wants to come up afterwards and take a look. It's a mixture of Nikon lenses and the Sigma lenses, plus a Tokina. And these all work well for my purpose. So I already did the image. So this was done at Green Bank as well. So during the Green Bank Star Quest, and that radio telescope that you're seeing is just small. It's not very big, but it's a solar. It actually tracks the sun. It's pulling off radio data from the sun as it goes through the sky during the day. But it made a nice shot, just lined up perfectly with, not perfectly, but close to perfectly with the celestial pole, and that's like 3 hours worth of time lapse, and then use that Star Stacks tool to create your time or your star field or your star tracks. Now last night, I'll show you back a couple of minutes here. Last night I did get some data, and let's see. So this was a hastily processed image this morning. So it needs more work, but this was and I haven't stretched it or anything yet. That's just the raw stacked data coming out in here. And I use astrophysical processing to do this. I'm going to do the same thing when we'll follow Nico's tutorial, and I'm going to do the same thing with serial. And see how, I like some of the processing tools that serial has. Like the gradient portion, the green eliminator. There was a Photoshop tool you can run on Windows versions of Photoshop, the green exterminator. It's kind of handy. I can't run it on a Mac. But that's just the raw stacked data, which I haven't done yet. And it was a panel. Something happened here. I have no idea what happened. You can see that either I hit the mount or something got squirrely during the imaging. I had to throw away about 4 frames because it either quit tracking or I don't know what happened. But it started tracking again, so I'm not sure what happened. But you can see I've got this little offset here. So this was the first part I did. That's an hour's worth of data. And then I switched over to a different part of the sky, and this is about 45 minutes. I do it over. I didn't get my full hour in, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of a line here. These images aren't quite the same amount of data. But this is showing, here's the North American, there's the butterfly, here's the veil complex up in here, then we've got the elephant head down here, and lots of dark areas. And that one image I showed earlier was a processed image that really brings out some of that dark parts. Yes, this was the 85 millimeter. Now this is a processed image of that same region, and it looks better on the laptop. You still don't have the dynamic range on the projector, but you can see there's lots of dark dust in the way. This is not void. There's stars there behind the dust. It would look like this if there was no dust in the way. So you get a lot of the dark nebula kind of all the way through that whole image. This would be a great, 3 or 4 hours worth of data and just pull that stuff out and get all that background flux. But this is just it's an 85 millimeter. That's what its field of view is. From Cygnus over and towards the elephant. So that's kind of it for the first part. I'm going to put my Jeremy hat on and do the next one. Before we do that, does anybody have any questions about astrophotography getting started? Yes.
You mentioned Magic Maynard, and you could also use it to do lighting pictures. It works well for that. It has a motion detection and it works well for doing fireworks. So
I've never tried it with fireworks, but I have done it with the lighting because it does do the motion detection. It kind of goes to the light view mode, and then it looks for any quick changes in it, to take a picture. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then also on the Milky Way, you have a free piece of software called Sequator or Sepulchre. I don't know how you pronounce it, but you can use that for your Milky Way pictures to stack them, and it does a really good job on those.
Okay.
You can block out stuff, and it's free software, and it looks great. So if you do 30-second exposures, 12 or 20 or whatever, you stack them all together. It's fairly easy to use with few little settings, and it worked great.
Yeah. I haven't tried it with ASI or Flash image because you can create a plan and do the same thing except there's
Yeah, I have done it.
this whole plan and let it just go do its thing. But I haven't tried that yet. Any other questions? Okay, let's just go ahead and jump into the eclipse. Jeremy was going to do the eclipse stuff, and I don't know what he was going to do, so I'll do what I did in Green Bay. So if you saw it in Green Bay, sorry. This is the last, kind of thing. So before we do that, we just show I'll show the 2017 data that I got for the eclipse. Some of the data. So I created some montages of the images. So you can see different parts of the eclipse. As you start kind of from the left, that's called the diamond ring. That's right before totality. So there's just a little tiny sliver of the sun still visible. And then it gets smaller and smaller. And you can get into what they call the Bailey's beads. And that's where particularly on this image, what we're getting is sunlight's coming through the mountains on the moon. So, the moon's not perfectly flat, so it has mountains. So as the sun's sneaking behind there, there's still sun coming through the the mountains. And so they call that Bailey's beads, because you're getting little parts of it. And you can see on the image over on the left, there's the lower left, there's a little gap, it looks like, and then at the top part there's a gap. And then you get into totality, and you can see the corona, which I'll show here in a second. You can see the corona. You can see the corona naked eye. And you start coming out of totality, and you start getting the reverse. You get the Bailey's beads, and then you get the diamond ring, and then you're out of totality. So these are some of the corona images that I was processing, multiple images. It is stitched together. And that's just the different exposures. As you can see, it's going through and taking multiple pictures. And then I start building up the corona. This is like a 2-second exposure, so it's really overexposed. And just take a series of those. And but how do we do this? How do we get these pictures? The first thing that I'll say, and this is what I said at Green Bay, is how to image without missing the event with your own eyes. Do not be, if you go to the 2024 eclipse, which I highly recommend it, it's going to be close. It's going to go from like Cleveland down to Texas. Find someplace along the eclipse line and get there in April 2024. Go someplace where it's clear. Forecast to be clear. You might have to make last minute drive, 500 miles to go someplace. Do it. If you've never seen an eclipse, this is the last one for a while. So try to get there. For the purpose of looking up, do not be fiddling around with your camera during the eclipse, because you'll miss it. It's an awe-inspiring event. Who's been to a total eclipse? So a good portion of you have. So you understand. You don't want to be looking down. You want to be looking up and experience the event, especially if you're in a big group of people. So the purpose of this is how, if I want to try to capture the data, how can I do that? The same type of gear that you normally use for nighttime, because you have to be tracking. This is a long event. It takes a while for it to occur. So you need to be tracking through the period. I was using DSLRs. You don't have to. You can use whatever imaging camera that you have. But the tools that I use for the automation work with DSLRs. Telephoto lenses or small telescopes, you don't want to have something, you want to catch the corona. You want to get the extent of what's happening with the atmosphere of the sun. So you don't want to go too narrow. Keep a fairly wide field. All the pictures I showed were either with a 180 millimeter telephoto lens or a 300 millimeter telephoto lens. And that's what I'm going to be using this go around as well. If you're using a small telescope, keep it in the 300-400 millimeter max, because you're too close to the sun and you won't be seeing the corona. And of course, solar filters for your lenses. Up until totality, you need to keep a filter on your camera, or you run the risk of destroying heat up, melt, certainly. I don't care. You can get the Vader film from the Vader Planetarium. You can make your own lens coverage. You can buy them pre-made for your particular lens setup. You can also get 1,000 Oaks Optical has a film. The Vader is a white, so if you see the image of the sun to be white, whereas 1,000 Oaks is more than orange color. So you can pick whichever one or use one of each, blend them however you want to. I'd start sourcing that now if you want to, because when it gets closer, it'll start becoming scarce. As people start buying, it'll be harder to get. And don't use any knockoffs. Get the Vader Planetarium or the 1,000 Oaks Optical. So you can get that on Amazon or any of the stores. High Point, all of those. It's your more pre-made filters. Automate the process. The primary goal is it's hands-off. We don't want to be doing anything. The only time you need to get engaged is to remove the filter. And the software that you use will tell you when it's time to remove the filter. So you're sitting there, you've got your glasses on, your solar glasses, and you're looking up, you're watching everything, you're almost to totality, and all of a sudden you'll hear a beep. And that beep indicates you come over here and take the filter off. And that's all you need to worry about. And then you'll later on, 4 or 5 minutes later, in this particular eclipse, you'll hear another beep to tell you to put the filter back on. So that's the only thing you have to be worry about in this particular style is taking the filter off. And what we're trying to capture are those images I showed earlier, the diamond ring, Bailey's beads, totality, and corona. You can use a laptop to control your camera. The laptop knows what time it is. The laptop knows where you need to tell the laptop where you are. Accurate GPS coordinates, because if they're 100 miles away, the timing of the events are different. Totality happens at a different time, 100 miles away, than it does at your point, your location. So you need to let the laptop know what your GPS coordinates are. And you can run one of these 2 pieces of software. I've not used those. My plan was this year to use the Eclipse Maestro. It's my understanding that they're not going to update it for the newer versions of the Mac, so I might have to go to the Eclipse Orchestrator. Yes.
So I was going to use, I think, both APT as a photography tool and the Backyard EOS. You just have to program it in advance and I hit go, which is both
So
of them.
APT and then Backyard EOS.
Backyard EOS, but Backyard EOS is not free, but APT is a free demo. I've had some success.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. I'll take a look at that.
But that's free. The demo is free.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last go around, I used Magic Lantern. And with Magic Lantern, as I mentioned, it's a program that loads on your camera after it boots up. So it's not firmware replacement, it's firmware augmentation. It's just adding some additional features on top of the existing firmware that's in the camera. And one of those options is the ability to run scripts. And so there's a script that you get, and you edit the script file, you put all the event times. Totality starts at my location at 12:01 p.m. in 13 seconds. And so you put all these events for first contact, when the sun first touches the moon, that's first contact, and then you've got second contact, which is totality, and then you've got coming out of totality, and you have final contact. Put all those events in there, and it will, and you give it the correct time and the correct location that you're in, all those parameters, and it will do those sequence of image capture.
As I say, if you don't want to use a computer, you can get an intervalometer that does exposure ramping. So it'll ramp up the exposure so you can get the different degrees of the corona over the eclipse.
They can do that too, and just turn it on just to let it sit there and stick.
It does the exposure ramping automatically.
Yeah, and you can, and there's some tables and charts. If you're interested in doing it, these are two excellent sites for information. Jerry Rodriguez, astropix.com, and Fred Espinac, MrEclipse.com. They have all kinds of detail. The exposures, what type of lens are you using, what's the f-stop of your lens or your telescope. This is the exposures you need in order to capture the diamond ring. You have the 4,000th of a second at f8 for this particular focal length. And so it gives you all those charts that you can look at to match your equipment to the proper exposures, so that you're not either underexposing or overexposing. And
so for a partial or annular eclipse, how do you deal with, like, for example, sensor dust versus focal length? Like, for example, the June 2021 eclipse, I had like a chunk of dust on the sensor. So like every single photo has a splotch on it. But the photos with the telephoto lens, you can't see it. But the photos of the telescope, you can, it's much more obvious. Say the shorter the focal length, the less likely the dust will be in front of the sun. And say that, and I was thinking maybe for the October eclipse, I'm going to have to, clean the sensor and then kind of not use the camera until the eclipse, kind of, or how do you deal with the dust?
Keep it clean, and you can, even with that, you can still do some flat image processing.
Oh, you can take it out.
You can still probably process it out with flat.
It's on the sun, it's very obvious.
Yeah,
It's on the sun.
And the longer the focal length, the worse it is.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to test.
So I use about 1,000 millimeters to get the sun close up.
Yeah, if you ever want to test and see how much dust you have on your sensor, just use the lens and stop it down. Like this one, go down to f32 and take an image at f32, and it'll show you every speck of dust you have on your sensor. If you ever want to look at that, just stop it down to a really tight focal length. But you can go out to Jerry's site for this, and then Mr. Eclipse. Both those sites are good resources. I'll show you a chart here.